What happens when governments intervene within markets? Remember, we discussed that governments tend to be a little bit more cognizant about issues of equity or fairness rather than efficiency. So we want to see exactly what happens within our marketplace or economy when governments institute some type of price controls, such as price ceilings or price floors. So can they actually be a cause of market failures themselves? So price controls are essentially policies that the government may want to intervene within particular markets in order to benefit a particular subset of the market or economy. Do they want to benefit consumers or do they want to benefit producers? And that's what the sort of main idea of these price controls are going to be. Remember, we worked with the idea of laissez-faire, where markets are allowed to function without any government intervention, so it's a very hands-off type of economy. But in this particular section, we want to go ahead and see what happens when the government actively intervenes within the marketplace with these price controls. So let's go ahead and take a look at price ceilings first. So a price ceiling is a government set maximum price that can be charged for a good or service. Essentially, the government takes a look at this particular market and says, I think that the prices are a little bit too high within this market, and we want to go ahead and artificially lower the price. So that's where they go ahead and institute the policy of a price ceiling. With this in mind, we have the typical supply and demand analysis right here, where the equilibrium price is PE. With the equilibrium price of PE, the government says, we think that this price is too high, let's go ahead and lower it with a price ceiling. So if they want to artificially lower the price, that's going to go ahead and institute a price ceiling, which is going to be set below our equilibrium price. However, anytime prices are set below equilibrium, what type of economic situation is going to emerge? We notice that because prices are very low, we notice that quantity supplied is going to be less than quantity demanded. So anytime a price ceiling is going to be set into place within a marketplace, we notice that a shortage is going to take place. So here, with an effective price ceiling, if the price ceiling is set below our equilibrium price, that just tells us it's going to lead to a shortage. Essentially, prices cannot go beyond the price ceiling. So this is the maximum price that can be charged for this good or service. And in terms of application of these price ceilings, there's actually a few good examples in the real world of price ceilings taking place. And we can see exactly what's happening in each of these circumstances. So price ceiling examples. So with price ceiling examples, remember the government is trying to artificially lower the price. They're trying to benefit the consumers. Here are three examples. One, we have New York is probably the best example with rent control. Number two, we have a case here in Florida with State Farm. We have State Farm house insurance. House insurance. And if we want to get a little bit more international, we can say Venezuela. So Venezuela. So how exactly do price ceilings affect each one of these examples? So in New York, there is a very, very big shortage for rent control housing. Basically, a lot of government officials in New York, they say, hey, rent is very, very high, so let's go ahead and institute a price ceiling, a artificially low price for this subset of buildings, so rent is going to be very, very low in this particular location. However, because rent is very, very low compared to everywhere else in New York City, we see a very, very high quantity demanded for this type of rent-controlled housing. So there's a very big shortage of rent-controlled housing in New York City, and this is one of the issues that we see within effective price ceiling, a big shortage of this type of housing in New York. Number two, State Farm house insurance. So years ago, State Farm actually used to insure houses in Florida. However, the government of Florida, the state government said, we believe that State Farm is charging too much for housing premiums, so we want to artificially lower the price that State Farm can actually charge for house insurance. State Farm took a look at this and said, yeah, I'm not going to deal with this anymore, so we're just going to not insure houses anymore. So they actually don't insure houses in Florida. So this is one of the main reasons why we see that State Farm doesn't insure houses, only sort of vehicles in the state of Florida. And then in terms of Venezuela, under the Chavez, under the Maduro regime, we see a huge shortage of food and a lot of other goods and services within the country. So here, the government is artificially lowering the prices. They're saying, hey, this is going to be good for the consumers. But there is not enough of this good of the food or the services or goods to go around within the country, so we see very huge shortages in the country with this. So here with the price ceilings, we do notice that this is going to have a huge impact in terms of efficiency and welfare. It's not very efficient at all. So what does the government try to do? We notice that the government tries to artificially lower the prices in order to benefit consumers, to benefit the consumers, or the demand side of the market, so the demand curve. So the government tries to benefit consumers, but we notice that it's going to have an impact on our ideas of efficiency and welfare. What do we notice about consumer surplus? We notice that, yeah, consumers are going to be the ones that benefit from this, so consumer surplus increases. But what happens to our other ideas of efficiency and welfare? We notice that producer surplus is going to be lower because prices are artificially low. So therefore, producers and firms are not incentivized to supply as much as before. We notice that because we are not at our equilibrium intersection of supply and demand, we are inefficient. So dead weight loss is going to be higher. And then because we have some type of inefficiency, that just tells us that total surplus or welfare is going to be lower as a result as well. So here we notice that because prices are below equilibrium, as we sort of suggested in the previous sort of lectures, we notice that consumers are going to benefit, producers are going to be hurt, dead weight loss is going to be higher, and we notice that total surplus is lower as a result. So one thing that we also want to talk about is what happens if the government actually makes a mistake and sets the price ceiling above equilibrium price. So we notice that in this example right here, the price ceiling was set below equilibrium price, but what happens if the government makes a mistake and sets the price ceiling above equilibrium price? So let's go ahead and take a look at this question. What happens if price ceiling is set above equilibrium price? Is set above equilibrium price. So the example or the sort of scenario that we're suggesting in this question right here is, suppose we have supply and demand. We have demand, we have supply. And the government says, hey, we set the price ceiling right here. So price ceiling here. Do you think that this is going to have any impact within the marketplace? The answer in this scenario is going to be no. Remember that a price ceiling is a government set maximum price that can be charged for a good or service. This is the highest price that someone can actually charge for the good. If the price ceiling is set above equilibrium price, there's actually nothing stopping the marketplace from reaching our equilibrium point right here. So essentially, there's nothing preventing us from being at our happy little place. So in this event, if the price ceiling is set above equilibrium price, we consider this to be a special price ceiling, which is called non-binding. And non-binding just tells us that we have no impact or no effect on equilibrium. So non-binding or no effect on equilibrium. So here, a non-binding price ceiling is set above equilibrium price, essentially because it's not going to have any impact within the marketplace or on the economy. So that tells us that in order for us to have an effective price ceiling, it needs to be set below equilibrium price. So an effective or binding price ceiling is set below equilibrium price. Is set below equilibrium price. So here, an effective price ceiling needs to be set below equilibrium price. Effective meaning having its intended impacts of artificially lowering the price. Notice that the key word here is effective. It is not efficient. So price controls are never efficient at all. Price ceilings, price floors are not efficient. So effective in this case just means that in order to have its impacts, in order to have its intended effects that we see right here, artificially lowering the price. So do be very cognizant that effective and efficient mean two very different things in economics. So here, this is the price ceiling in action. We have a non-binding price ceiling, which is set above equilibrium price, but in order to have an effective or binding price ceiling, it needs to be set below equilibrium price. We'll see the sort of analogous impacts on the marketplace in the next lecture video when we take a look at a price floor.